Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be finally covering the December 2023 Winter War Reserve Pool. Now this is a video that has been in the making for a long time, and by in the making I mean I said I was going to do it and then didn't do it. But, you know, now is better than never, so we're going to just jump straight into it, and as you can see on screen now, those are all of the cards that have been rotated. They've been out of the game for almost 2 months now. And so the basics of rotation, just a quick refresher in case anyone's forgotten. These cards are removed from the game. You cannot play them in standard play. If you own them, they are still in your collection, and you can still play them in friendlies, or you can put them into a deck and then queue Classic, which is an unranked game mode where you can play reserved cards. And these reserve cards will stop showing up in packs, etc. And then each expansion, I think it's around 80 cards get reserved, and then about 20 new cards that were previously reserved get brought back into the game. So I'm now realizing that I didn't mention which cards were brought back. I will add that in at the end of the video. But yeah, so all of these cards were removed. Don't worry if you can't see which ones they are yet. We will be going over them one at a time. So, let's roll the intro and get straight into the video.
What a performance there by J King.
J King, full plot armor.
J King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J King is our world champion! J King 7! What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!
Alright, so starting with Britain, and this is going to go in order of nations, and then within the nations, it's going to go in order of rarity. So, starting with the 3 British elites that were rotated, we have Manchester 1A. I mean, this card saw a very, very, very brief amount of play in Brit-US ramp decks in, like, 2020. But honestly, it's just too expensive. Like, if you compare this to B17, you're spending 2 additional credits for the ability to target the unit, which it's not necessarily bad. You can also play this on 7 and then destroy a unit on the following turn. Or just save it until they have a unit worth destroying. However, there's a lot of the units you kind of want to destroy may not be targeted by orders, which is a massive drawback. Also means that, like, if it's destroyed by, like, a countermeasure, when you play it, you can't then play the precision bombing. And, like, even if you wanted to do all of that, B17, it's just a better body. 5/5 heavy armor is better than 6/4. And B17 isn't even necessarily a card that was run 100% of the time in Brit Ramp to begin with. So yeah, Manchester, just a really weak card that never really saw any serious play, and it is gone now. First Air Landing Brigade. This is a weird one for them to have rotated because they have recently buffed it. It saw 0 play because it was terrible. And then they recently buffed it and made it very interesting, much better, and it was beginning to see some amount of play, and now it's rotated. So this is a weird one. They've done this before where they, like, rotated cards that were recently reworked. I mean, I guess they just reworked it before they decided they were doing rotation, and then once they decided they were doing rotation, they were like, well, let's just axe it instead of axing a card people actually play. Speaking of cards that people actually play, of course, Monty was rotated. This is probably, like, the most played elite, I would imagine, across the entirety of Cards history. It is just so ludicrously good. It just fits into any deck, and even after the nerf, it was still very good, although substantially worse, but very good. I hope that Monty gets just reworked in the future. My suggestion was always, if it pins 3 or less units, draw a card, or less than 3 units, draw a card. Just because I don't understand why you were rewarded for it doing more. It's just really weird. Like, of course, you're gonna save it to pin more units, because 1, you're pinning more units, and 2, you draw if you pin more units. Whereas if you make it an actual decision of playing it to pin less units, but you get the card draw, it's interesting. But of course, it's also perfectly fine to just play the game without Monty for a while. And you know what? It's a lot of fun. Turns out it's a ton of fun to play the game without Monty existing. And also, Forced Surrender exists, and should not exist in the same world as Monty. And this is interesting, as we will see with the other nations, because Monty is getting rotated. Monty is one of 5 elites, one for each nation, that came in the basic set, where they have a 1-cost general who does something. So there's, of course, Patton in US, there's Zhukov in Soviets, there's Admiral Yamamoto, and there is... I'm blanking on the... Fast Times, of course, in Germany. So, these 1-cost general cards, really interesting, helps define the archetypes for those nations. And with Monty being rotated, they decided to just rotate all of them, so all of the other 4, which saw substantially less play, have all been axed as well, but we will get to those individually. Then we have Daylight Bombing being rotated. This is a good change. Just credit denial should not exist in the game. And lots, credit denial on a couple of cards, I've kind of talked about this before, but credit denial on some cards, for example, Admiral Hipper, Strategic Bombing, really good. The cheaper the credit denial card is, the stronger it is, the stronger the effect is if you play it on curve, and also the more credit denial that exists in the game that you can fit into a single deck, the much, much, much better it gets. So just rotating Daylight Bombing, this opens up a lot of design space in the future, and I hope this card never comes back. I hope this card just rots in Classic. Then we have Fog of War. This one, I'm a little sad to see it go, because I'm a huge fan of Fog of War. I was the first person to play Fog of War competitively. A lot of people were just like, well, this card's terrible. Because it's so greedy, it's so slow. You play this on your own big unit, but then you remove it from the board, and you have to wait, and then you draw it on the following turn. And if you play it on an opponent's unit, you're just giving them value. Well, as it turns out, if you play this on an opponent's low-cost unit that does nothing, you are essentially denying them 2 draws. And it also acts as just a 4-cost remove anything as a panic button. I really like Fog of War. I think it's a really interesting card. I think it's really well designed. I think it has a lot of room to play. Of course, it mainly saw play being abused in these draw denial discard decks that most people do not like playing against. Myself included, I don't like playing against it. I like playing with it, I don't like playing against it. So I think it's fine for Fog of War to have some time in the timeout corner. I would be sad if it never comes back, but to be completely honest, I don't think it would be the end of the world. There's a lot of future design space you can do with British orders that could take up similar roles as Fog of War. So if it never comes back, it's fine. If it does come back, cool. Then we have the number 3 Commando. I've never seen anybody play this card. This card is hilariously bad. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what world this card could be played in. It doesn't even have smokescreen. To think that this card is going to somehow lock out your opponent because they can't remove it, and also all of their units have 5 or more attack in hand and board, and then also you can then take advantage of this with units that have 4 or less attack, or with some sort of combo. I don't know really what the point of this card was, but it's gone now. And also gone is Radar Alert, and this brings us to the second sort of theme of cards that are being removed from this rotation, or cards that were removed from this rotation, I should say, which is countermeasures. A lot of countermeasure cards got removed from this expansion, including Radar Alert, which saw very limited play. I mean, you'd see it on ladder from time to time, but I don't think this ever saw any competitive play. Then we come to the third theme of cards that are being removed, or cards that were removed, which is card draw. We saw this in the last rotation. They took out a lot of card draw from the last rotation, including mobilization. And they're finally axing Lend-Lease, and I'm very happy about this. I was, saying, why is Lend-Lease not rotated in the previous rotation? This was, my number 1, why was this card not rotated? And now this card was rotated. I think this is really good overall for the game, and I think we've been seeing that it's very good overall for the game. I'm very happy with the place that Britain fits within the meta, both Britain main and Britain ally, where it's not gone, but also it doesn't have Lend-Lease anymore, so it's not the only thing you can do anymore. So that's really neat. But yeah, we'll go through and see a lot of card draw was just removed from the game, and we've reached a really interesting point in the game that really hasn't existed since sort of 2020, where most decks lack card draw, except because everybody lacks card draw, it's kind of fine. It's just really problematic when certain decks do not lack card draw, because then anything deck that does lack card draw sucks. But now that everybody is sort of lacking that for card draw, with some very big exceptions, namely Take Liberty, it does reach these interesting states. And yeah, Lend-Lease, I kind of hope it doesn't come back, just because I feel like there's a lot more interesting things you can do with card draw, but I wouldn't be that surprised if it comes back eventually. Then we have Anti-Air Gun that got rotated. This saw some very limited play very, very recently by Gorky in a pin deck during, well, air was playable, with basically just the idea of pin all of your opponent's units over and over and over and over and eventually win with Commonwealth, or just a little bit of burn damage in with these artilleries and the like. But before that, it saw very little play, and then air got nerfed and stopped seeing play, so this became much less playable. It's just really, really slow. It needs to be a very specific meta and a very specific deck for this to see play, and now it's gone, and that's fine. Then, along with Manchester, we saw Precision Bombing go. Precision Bombing used to see a lot of play, like back in 2020 and 2019. It might actually not even, I don't remember exactly when this card was nerfed. I don't remember if it was 2020 or 2019, but this card used to cost 3, and it saw a decent amount of play. And then they made it cost 4, and then also people realized that it wasn't really that good to begin with, and now it sees 0 play. And I've literally not seen anybody play this card for the last 3 years, and now it's rotated. Royal West Kents, I don't have anything to say about this card. Argyllshire Highlanders. Honestly, this card was interesting. This card had some potential, especially in these Poland decks. Also, of course, famously, Spoos used this to win the 2024 Cards World Championship. And it's gone, but honestly, I do kind of hope it comes back. And we have Aerial Reconnaissance. This saw a lot of play, actually. And I shouldn't say a lot of play. This was a regularly seen card in very, very specific decks, which was combo decks. So, for example, this saw play in the Siberian Transfer OTK. This saw play in Spitfire OTK. This saw play in even just sometimes like in certain like pop-off decks, like Reichsbank Commandos sometimes would run like a single copy of Aerial Reconnaissance. It was just like a really good like one-of card to throw in your deck to they give you a bunch of tempo in these sort of British style draw a lot of cards decks. But again, it's a countermeasure, and countermeasures are seemingly on the way out with this rotation. Then getting on to the standards, we have Matilda. Yeah. We have Baluch Regiment. This card actually saw some amount of play back in 2020. Also, did they recently buff this? Because for the longest time, this said give your HQ +2 defense. I honestly do not remember them buffing this. But like I'm like 90% sure that it said +2 defense for the longest time. But anyways, this card saw an amount of play. I didn't think this card was terrible. I actually thought this card had potential to come back into the meta if the meta slowed down slightly and rotation took away a lot of Britain's more absurdly broken cards. However, I think that just the meta would have to become the meta for that to be playable again is very, very specific, and I don't think the devs really wanted that meta to exist anyways. And Baluch is out. And then we have another countermeasure, Doubting System is out. This one I'm just so happy I no longer have to play around this on ladder, because, dear lord, I hated this card. This card saw a ton of play back when it cost 2, and then they made it cost 3, and it saw still a ton of play on ladder, which was really, really frustrating, but it saw basically no competitive play after that point, because it's just too expensive for a much more limited effect. Then we have Supply Drop. I really love Supply Drop. This is honestly one of my favorite cards in the game. And it's really, really difficult to use, but I really liked it existing in the game as a card that you could theoretically use and think about in deck building. And so I do hope they bring back Supply Drop. I think this is a really interesting card with a lot of potential. And yeah, honestly, I was actually like thinking of a Supply Drop deck last week, and then I went to build it and realized it had been rotated. So, very sad about this. Critical Damage, I mean, everybody knows Critical Damage got released. Nobody ever played it. Then they released Supply Drop, or Supply Shortage, sorry. And then Critical Damage became like the most played card in the game, because Supply Shortage plus Critical Damage meant you win the game. And then they nerfed Critical Damage into this garbage, and it never saw play again. And now it's gone. So yeah, the short story of critical damage. And yeah, no one's gonna miss this interception. Another countermeasure that's gone, and another countermeasure I'm glad I no longer have to play around. Although I mean, it's very similar to secret operatives. Obviously, the big difference is this stops things from going to the HQ. And also is a standard, but yeah, well, I'll talk about it more once we get to the end of this, but I do think there's a possibility that this comes back. Welsh Guards, this is a very interesting one. Welsh Guards had a history of seeing literally zero play from when it came out in Allegiance, which meant it came out in 2020. So absolutely no play up until like the last like 2 months of the last meta, when people started playing this in Britain, Japan, PIN. So that as just a one cost trigger for the 2k draw 2 cards if you have a guard that was released in the last expansion. So yeah, just a 1k trigger for guards to 2k draw 2. And also it gave you a little bit of health and also had guards, so like it could block a body, like it had to be removed. So yeah, it's really weird that this card that just looks so terrible suddenly saw play in a very brief window of time, and then now it was axed. Then on to German cards, we have Hornisse. This card saw basically no play, and it's hilariously bad. The one thing I want to mention about this card, though, is this card came out in, I believe that's Breakthrough, and this card came out as part of a group. So there's a couple of groups in the game of elites that basically do the same thing. So the previously mentioned the previously mentioned groups of the one-cost generals. So as we see in the next card, Fast Heinz, and Monty, etc. There's also the most recognizable group, which is the 0-4 smokescreens, like the Pioneers, the Signal Regiments, the Engineer Regiments, the Jaskos, etc. But a lesser recognized group, but a group nonetheless, was the Breakthrough planes that drew cards. So there was 5, each nation got a elite plane that drew a card in a weird and unique way. So, for example, there's the Yak 7 in Soviets, which is the 2-cost 2/2 deal 1 damage to yourself and draw a card at the start of your turn. There's Hornisse, which is draw a card and deal damage equal to the cost. There was Sunderland, which was just draw a card. Sunderland was the boring one. But you know, it's a 6-cost 2/8. Like, it has some really funky stats. Was it 2-cost 2 or 6-cost 2/6? I don't even remember. Then nobody ever played Sunderland. And then there was the Key 83 in Japan, which was draw 2 cards, but your opponent draws a card. Or sorry, you draw a card, but your opponent draws 2 cards, and it has an insane body. Anyways, and Catalina for US. And my point is, these were all a group. All of these cards came out at the exact same time and functioned really similarly. I'm really sad that they didn't rotate all of these as a group, just for like the symmetry. I'm going to look at like Yak and Catalina still being in the game and just get mad that Hornisse is gone, but Yak is still in the game. Just make everything symmetrical for me, please. And also, we'll see once we get to Japan, they're rotating Key. But that's really all I have to say about Hornisse. Just, it's part of a group, and that's basically all there is to say about the card. Fast Heinz. Fast Heinz, like, saw a limited amount of play. It saw a ton of play back in the day. And then they nerfed it. And then it saw limited play. Fast Heinz was kind of low tier 2. And then it came back at points. However, when it did come back, people weren't running Fast Heinz in the deck anymore. The famous no Heinz. And then Heinz sort of came back into the deck, of course, the famous no Heinz. And now we're going to go back to the no Heinz, no Heinz. So, yeah, I would be shocked if this card does not come back. Same with Monty. I mean, I would be shocked if these general cards stayed out of the game for more than a year. Then we have Lurking Danger, which fits into the remove countermeasures theme. If you're removing a lot of the countermeasures from the game, you should probably also remove the card that draws countermeasures. Lurking Danger saw a ton of play. I think I was the first person to play this competitively, when it was just like, up until that point, people were like, why would you ever, like, countermeasure decks so bad? But it's like, well, turns out if you have just like 4 or 5 countermeasures in an otherwise normal control deck, running a copy of Lurking Danger just because Germany lacked card draw, it was pretty good. So I just sort of saw play because it was kind of good. And now it's not going to be here. Then we get on to the German special. So the German elites were largely not too consequential. Like, they lost to Renacia, no play. Heinz, basically no play. Lurking Danger, little play. Now we get to the German specials, the 4 German specials that were rotated. First up, we have Wolfpack. I mean, they said they were going to rework Wolfpack back in 2021. They said that they didn't want to have the draw denial aspect to this card, and they were going to completely change this card in the next balance patch, back in, I think, June 2021. Well, it is now January 2024, and Wolfpack still reads exactly the same. They just never changed it. And I don't think it's because they forgot. I think they just couldn't figure out, like, a way that they could change this that they were happy with. And now... And then, like, since that point, Wolfpack, of course, had a massive impact on the meta, especially in the post-expansion meta after the last expansion, where Japan-German discard and German-Japan discard and Britain-German discard became, like, the best decks in the game, and everyone was just playing discard all the time, and it sucked. And then, you know, they butchered Case Yellow. And now they're just rotating Wolfpack. This is just a really safe decision, especially if you're removing a lot of the card draw. Turns out Wolfpack is really, really good. And this way, they don't have to worry about just whatever German allied discard deck being the best deck in the game after every single expansion, because it just punishes people trying out new things. Then, the next German special to be rotated was Martyr, which fits into the rotating card draw theme, because, oh boy, could Martyr draw a lot of cards. This was a card that saw absolutely no play, and then they changed it to its current version. And then it saw very limited play. Like, it took a long time for people to really grow onto this card. Like, it started seeing play immediately in Heinz, but Heinz was not that popular. And in Jagro, it saw basically next to no play. Like, people were trying out, like, one occasionally, because you were playing Feigned Retreat, and you just play Errado, draw Feigned Retreat, play Feigned Retreat, win the game. Why do you need Martyr? And, like, Frontline didn't see it at all. And then Feigned got rotated, people started, like, at the start of the last expansion, people started playing Martyr more and more and more, and realized, oh wait, this card's kind of insane. And it really just hit this point where Martyr just, like, became the main card draw feature of almost every single deck. And it was a little absurd. And now Martyr is gone, and honestly, I'm happy with this. I kind of hope it doesn't come back, or if it does come back, it comes back in a nerfed version, because this version is just really, really, really powerful. Speaking of really, really powerful and really, really common cards, was Whirlwind, which is another card that saw next to no play, and then they buffed it, and then it slowly started to see a lot of play. And what's actually really interesting about Whirlwind is it used to be a 2/2. That was the big thing, is it just used to have 1 less health. And nobody played it. And I began experimenting with this card. I was like, wait, maybe this card's, like, actually kind of much better than everybody thinks it is. Because I'd seen next to no play, but I was, like, starting to build my own decks. I was starting to become a bit of a deck builder. And I started playing 2/2 Whirlwind, and I was like, this is kind of good. And then they buffed it to 2/3. And then everybody played it in every single German deck for the rest of time. And now it's rotated. And I think this is kind of healthy for the game. Like, there's definitely points in the meta, because Jet exists, where it's like, wow, I really wish that there was a easy way to stop big blitz fighters coming down relatively early in the game. However, I think this is generally good for Whirlwind to be gone from the game. It lets sort of other strategies breathe for a bit, because, oh man, you could not play certain decks. Excuse me, you could not play certain decks because of Whirlwind existing. And then we get to the 4th card that was rotated, the 4th German special that was rotated, which is Errado, which of course saw a ton of play. It was the cornerstone of Feigned Retreat, and then, you know, they removed Feigned Retreat, so it didn't see as much play after that, but it was still really, really good in German-Japan discard and Japan-German discard, because it's just a cheap thing that would draw you a card. The interesting combo people started playing at the start of the last expansion was Errata with air superiorities as just sort of like a really cheap way to remove something, like act as early removal in Japan and Germany, which traditionally, well, especially Japan, traditionally lacks early removal. And so, yeah, I saw a ton of play in control decks. And yeah, I hope Errado comes back, because I think Errado is just a really solid card, where you're making your deck overall worse by lowering the total value of your deck. But in return, you're kind of getting a bit of tempo. Like a 1/2 fighter on its own is really, really weak. However, you know, it can situationally block bombers. It can fish for specific cards in your deck. I just think it's a really interesting card, so I hope it comes back within the near future. But overall, this means a huge hit to Germany because Wirbelwind Martyr were run in Jagro, Frontline Heinz. Errata was run in Jagro and most German control decks, main and ally. Plus Wolfpack was like the cornerstone of German control decks, main and ally. Germany was absolutely gutted. And if I was recording this before the expansion dropped and we got to see what happened, I would say that Germany would be the weakest. And, well, Germany is still the most affected nation by rotation. Maybe Japan. We'll get to Japan next. But before expansion, I would have said Germany is the weakest nation. Like, going into Worlds, everybody at Worlds sort of agreed, like, Germany is kind of the weak deck right now. Like, Germany's the, what do you do with Germany? Weakest deck in the lineup. We all thought, like, oh, what are we going to be doing with Germany? And then we saw that War Production and 64th Panzer Grenadiers are pretty good, and also Jet Protection, or, not Jet Production, Jet Prototype is pretty good. So, yeah, Germany turned out to be the best nation, even despite losing all of these cards, but mostly because they got given ludicrously powerful cards from the expansion to make up for the fact that they lost a lot of stuff. But we're not even done going through the German cards. They lost a couple other things that don't really matter, such as Hummel. I don't think I saw this play outside of the meme retreat deck and Pauper. Junkers, never seen this card outside of draft. This card is just hilariously terrible. The Panzer 3G, I mean, I've heard people talk about theoretically using this card as anti-pin, but Rally is just so much obscenely better anti-pin tech that I've never actually seen Panzer 3G or considered running it myself. We have Reinforcements, which is a card that has... You read this card and it feels like it should be really good. Like, I feel like a lot of people who come to cards from other card games and haven't played it yet look at Reinforcements and are like, this card's kind of insane. Like, I remember when they added draw a card to this card. I think it just used to be 3k fully repair all friendly units and nobody played it. And then they put draw a card on this and I was like, oh man, this is going to see so much play. And then it didn't. It's just a little awkward. You would just rather play another unit and trade off with the units you currently have than fully repair units. Like, nobody damages units without the intention of destroying them. So you have to trade and then play Reinforcements, but you're spending credits to trade, which makes it harder to play Reinforcements. It's just a really awkward card, and now it is gone. Then we have the third Fallschirmjäger. This card was released, and it was terrible, and then they changed it, and arguably it got worse. I've never seen this card played. I think that the change to it is arguably substantially worse. Then we have Lightning Strike, another countermeasure being removed. This one saw a lot of play in the German-France burn deck, and very limited play in Jagro. I know some Jagro players would play this card, because basically every nation in the game draws cards. You kind of have to draw cards. Whether you draw a lot of cards or a few cards, almost every deck draws cards. So just a 1 credit deal for damage to the HQ. Not terrible. However, not that great. Then another countermeasure is removed, Entrapment. I'm just glad I don't have to play around this on ladder anymore. Never saw, like, any meaningful competitive play. It's just too expensive to hold up a 5-cost countermeasure. Saw, like, some experimentation when they released that fighter that would trigger a countermeasure in your hand for you at the end of your turn. Since Entrapment is the largest countermeasure, so you can arguably get the most value out of it through that, but that never really took off. Then we have the 25 Panzer Grenadiers, one of 2 ways to get guards in Germany, in Germany, and except it's only guard in the front line. I've never seen anybody play this card. I don't even think I've ever seen this card in draft, although it's not terrible in draft, I would imagine. But yeah, just a really weird card. Then the 33rd Panzer Grenadiers. This is another card that saw no play, and then it was buffed, and then it continued to see no play, because it's just really hard to use. Like, you're just going to play Blitzkrieg as your finisher. It's difficult to play a 3-cost infantry, and then also attack with a bunch of tanks in the same turn, and not have better options. Especially considering that this is temporary buff. Yeah, this is just a card that's fine in, like, a sort of... It's not even that good in Pauper, but it's, like, fine in, like, a brand new collection. German aggro tank deck, but yeah, it has no place in any competitive sense. The Pack 38, easily one of the worst artilleries in the game, and that's kind of saying something because artillery suck, but a 3-cost 1/3 ambush that does triple damage to tanks. Also the only thing in the game that says triple damage, I believe. I'm not positive about that. But I believe this might be one of the only things in the game that says triple, which is just a weird design space that they've never moved forward with, so now they've just rotated this card, and I do not expect it to come back. Another countermeasure being removed, Retaliation. Again, this saw play in, like, German France Burn, and very limited play in weird Jaggro decks on ladder. I am, once again, very happy I don't have to play around this card. And then they removed the 1st Infantry Regiment, which is the card that you see is in your starter deck when you download the game for the first time and immediately remove it because it sucks. Then we get on to the Japan cards. And once again, the rotating draw, which is the key 83. And this just is an absolute unit of a unit. Just absolute monster. The key 83 originally had ambush on release. You're probably familiar with this card if you've played the game before December. This card was played in every single Japan deck ever. So just think of this card when it had ambush for like 2 months before they nerfed it. I remember being on a reveal stream when they announced this card, and I remember saying, this card will be the first card nerfed from this expansion. No doubts. And then it was the first card that was nerfed from this expansion. And that was before I was in IT, for anybody who thinks that was due to me manipulating IT. Yeah, no, this card just absolutely insane. Really, really interesting card. However, also a card where it was just like sometimes it would come down on turn 4 and certain nations literally have nothing to do against this and they just lose the game. So I'm happy it's gone because I was tired of just losing the game on turn 4 because they play key. Also, there's a lot of ways in this expansion to cheat stuff out, or at least a lot of ways to cheat stuff out that are becoming more meta. So I'm glad that nobody's cheating out turn 1 or 2 keys. However, I wouldn't be that surprised if this card comes back in the future, just because I feel like it is kind of iconic, with just how much play it saw throughout 100% of its time in the game. I would not be too surprised if we see this come back in the future. And I think this is the type of card where, like, every nation could easily be given tools to remove this, and then it becomes a good card rather than an insane card. Japan also lost Dina, more card draw, and Dina's an interesting one because it's never been changed. But on release, people were kind of mid about this card. People were just like, yeah, why, like, Japan has card draw, why would you play a really underwhelmingly statted unit to draw some of the weakest cards of your deck? Well, as it turns out, that's actually just really good. Like, just card draw is really, really good, and you run, like, between, like, 12 and 15 1-drops in Jaggro, so this draws, like, basically 100% of the time. It also specifically draws you units that are really, really powerful, such as the Type 93, to buff stuff up, your 1-cost Blitzers to trade out the front line, your Type 94s, because you're looking for multiple Type 94s to do surprise attacks, and most importantly, your Signal Regiment and your Arado to find Feigned Retreat. It turns out just your 1-cost units are kind of the best units in your deck. So Dina eventually saw a ton of play. And then it eventually started seeing play in control decks. Like, I saw play in discard because you would use this to find your Arados, which would then find your air superiorities, which would then remove their units. And just trying to fit in as much card draw as possible into that deck. And now Dina is gone. And honestly, I think this is kind of fine because it was really annoying because, like, Jaggro on the surface really looked like a free-to-play deck. You're like, oh, there's so many of these cards are just standards and limiteds and, you know, go face, deal HQ damage, win game. But then people would look at, like, the tournament Jaggro lists, and it would be, like, Key 83, Dina, Raiding Brigade, Shinano, Bombing Raid. Like, just everybody would throw in these good elite cards, and good elite cards that fit into every deck are kind of boring. So I'm kind of glad Dina's gone, and I would not hate it if it never came back, but I don't really have a strong opinion on that. And then, of course, Japan had its general rotated because Monty exists, and Admiral Yamamoto is a card that saw decks do no play ever, because it's just really, really bad. There's better ways to give units Blitz. It does not reduce their operation cost, which means it's really, really difficult to work out. And you mainly get value from this if you hit this with multiple units, but then you have to play this and multiple units and then attack with those multiple units, and that just takes a lot of credits. And why also all of the best expensive big Japanese air units already have Blitz. So yeah, it just never really saw play. They also lost Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack saw very, very limited play in like Japan, France Resistance when you were trying to win on Fatigue, and the game was really, really slow, but just 8 cost, remove a unit, really, really slow, and there's very few matchups where you need to remove multiple of a unit that you would otherwise be losing. So, like, if you would kind of just be crushing aggro, like, well, your victory against aggro was not dependent on them running out of cards. So, you know, playing Sneak Attack on, like, a cavalry regiment to remove 2 cavalry regiments from their deck is not going to impact the game whatsoever. And against control, the biggest units are all elites, so you're just playing 8 cost Blade of the Samurai. So why would you not just play Blade of the Samurai? They also rotated Aichi. My goodness, it feels good to not have to play against this card anymore. Aichi was a card that saw very little play. And I was actually thinking, like, oh, well, going into rotation, Aichi, like, I'd experimented with the old Aichi a lot. And I was excited to continue experimenting with the old Aichi. And then they decided to buff it into the best card in the game. And then it fit into every single deck ever. And it was really, really, really frustrating because just supply shortage was the only way to deal with Aichi, and supply shortage was already, like, one of the best removals in the game. So that just meant everybody was playing Aichi or supply shortage, which meant you couldn't play anything else because everything else loses to Aichi and supply shortage. And now Aichi is gone, and you know what? I'm happy with this. They buffed a card. It was far stronger than they expected. It worked the meta heavily for like a period of about 6 months. And then they rotated that card. I think that's fine. Like, they could have nerfed it sooner, but the fact that they rotated it instead is fine, I think. I hope this card never comes back, or if it does come back, just change it back to what it used to be. It wasn't that bad. Then they also lost Bicycle Regiment. Jaguar, so far, you've noticed, Jaguar's kind of lost a lot of cards. Like, Bicycle Regiment, Aichi, Ki, and Dina were all staples of Jaguar. Like, just, so far, those are 4 cards just straight up removed from a deck. However, that was removed from the best deck in the game that has seen constant play since beta. So, you know. Also, they got Type 94, early, which is just a really, really good, or is it Type 93 early? The new 1-cost 1/1 Blitz tank. It's just really good, and it kind of replaces Bicycle Regiment. Like, Bicycle Regiment is a really good card, but it's also a really frustrating card, because sometimes you just play it on turn 1, and then on turn 2, you'd play, like, double Type 93 and win the game on turn 3, because your opponent doesn't have a Bloody Sickle. So, yeah, just Fury on 1-drops with 0 operation cost should probably not exist. I would not be shocked if they bring back Bicycle Regiments in the future. However, I really, really, really hope they don't. Because 1, there's just, at one point, a critical mass of Blitz 1-drops that will make Jaguar insane. And 2, just 1-cost 0 up Fury. Please do not make it exist. Then we have For the Emperor got rotated. This one's a funny one. For the Emperor saw a pretty high amount of play for a card of this type in Brit-Japan Air, in German-Japan Heinz, and the German-Japan Heinz one in particular was the one that eventually got it nerfed. I was a big proponent of nerfing For the Emperor, because, you know, you would just play 4 tanks with Smokescreen, and then you would play For the Emperor and gain 8 credits. It's a 1-cost, gain 8 credits. It's kind of insane, because, as it turns out, moving and then attacking with a tank in 1 turn, means that costs 2 credits, and if you play For the Emperor, that means it goes from 2 credits to 0 credits, and if you do that on 4 tanks, that means you go from 8 credits to 0 credits, plus they get attack. For the Emperor is just an absolutely insane card, and they changed it. The way that they changed it was to make it Japanese units only, and this was back when Scouting Party was, like, draw 5 cards, discard all non-Japanese units, and also Sincerely, not Sincerely Yours, For Prosperity existed in the game, which was give your Japanese units +1/+1. I think that got rotated last time, if I remember correctly. So, like, this Japan, mono-Japan theme was kind of existing, and then they nerfed For the Emperor, and myself and a lot of people thought that they were going to, that meant that, like, signaled in the next expansion that they're going to actually push Mono Japan as, like, sort of the main Japanese archetype for that expansion. And then they changed Scouting Party, and then they never released any other Mono Japan cards, and then they rotated For the Emperor. So, yeah. I think they just probably realized that maybe they don't want to push mono decks in a game where a big part of deck building is what ally nation you pick, and the restriction on ally nation cards. Pushing just a mono deck is kind of just boring, and also requires giving Japan a large number of broken cards. Then they have Costly Victory. This card saw basically no play. Like, saw some play in Casino Jaguar just because remove cards meant that you could remove the 35th Mountain Rifles, which then summons the 5/5 for free. But realistically, like, why would you not just play Blade of the Samurai for 1 extra credit and not destroy your deck? Because this is remove. It doesn't even say discard, so it doesn't have synergy with, like, Betty and supply shortage, etc. Yeah, Costly Victory is just a weird card. I feel like they could have changed it from remove to discard, and it could have seen some amount of play, but it didn't, and now it's rotated, and that's fine. 61st Infantry Regiment got rotated. This is, again, going after the card draw. You're seeing a lot of card draw. Like, a lot of the meta card draw in the game has been removed from this rotation. 61st Infantry Regiment is honestly one of the most fair cards that has ever been printed, I feel like. Like, it's seen a lot of play since it was released, but it's never felt overwhelming. It's never felt frustrating like Takasagi. It was just always a card that was good enough to play. And now it's rotated, and I think that's fine. I kind of hope they bring it back eventually, but, like, this card wasn't making any decks. This card was just, like, an all-right thing to put into certain decks, and those decks were Japan control, which meant that they weren't that good. But you know, Japan German discard had its time in the sun, and this card was certainly running that. But I do like that this sort of opens up the design space to do maybe more interesting things with Japan control in the future, where they're not just exclusively reliant on playing 61st Infantry Regiment. Then they have the Sally, which, rest in peace, Sally Otike. Then they have the Claude, rest in peace, Bad Japan Air. Then they have For Glory, which is actually kind of a sad one. For Glory was released, and nobody played it, because it cost 3 credits, and it was really bad. And then they changed it to 2 credits, and nobody played it for a while. And then people started experimenting with it. And actually, at the start of the last expansion, people started playing it a lot. And then it saw, like, a decent amount of play as, like, a one-of tech card in a lot of these Japan controls, German Japan controls. And that was really interesting. It made you think about what cards you played and what order you played. Like, would you try to bait out For Glory? And if you're playing For Glory, you'd have to decide, do you want to play it, like, on turn 2 to remove a signal regiment, or do you want to hold it back for something else, something bigger? It's just a really interesting space in the meta that it created. And so I'm sad to see it's gone, and I hope it comes back. Then Type 94 TK, this card I'm not sad to see gone, and I do not hope it comes back. This card was released in Allegiance, and it didn't see a lot of play right off the bat, because Surprise Attack was a terrible card and nobody played it, and this card did not have Blitz. So why would you want to play this card? But eventually, I think it was actually the Chinese community realized that actually this card's kind of insane. Because it means you don't have to put Surprise Attack in your deck. And it's also just another 1-drop that you can play on turn 1 if you miss your, like, Cavalry Regiment or whatever. Your Cavalry Regiment or Bicycle Regiment. And then it doesn't cost you extra credits on turn 2. It does not affect your curve after you play it. And it gives you 1 piece of just, like, a remove any unit in the game, basically. If you can get a second Type 94. And that's really useful for getting through guides, and it means you don't have to run these, like, terrible cards like Outflank that are, like, situationally useless. So yeah, Type 94 ended up being absolutely insane, and then it saw play in every single Japan deck and most Japan ally decks until the end of time. So now it's gone, and this is another hit to Jagro, but honestly, this is a hit to Jagro I'm fine with. Rest in peace, Gunboat Raid Commandos. You were my beloved. Long Range Recon had an interesting history of being not that good, and then Japan France Resistance, turns out, was really good, and this card was absolutely insane. And then they gutted it into unplayability until people started to... Poland got enough options that Long Range Recon started to become like an interesting card you could play a couple of in Japan-Poland Legions, and now it is gone. And what's weird about this is it's kind of just a direct targeted hit to Japan-Poland Legions. I wonder if maybe they just thought Japan-Poland Legions control was going to be really good after this expansion, and they were worried that people would get tired of Japan control being good, because, you know, Japan, German discard, and Jaggro. So it's a weird nerf, but I'm kind of fine with this card. Like, Japan got Island Defense, so it's not like Japan's losing their only heal card. They have alternatives. Then we have Imperial Strength going. This is, again, it's just anti-countermeasure synergy, and this, I suppose I'll give my theory now. My theory is that they're going to have a countermeasure-themed expansion in the near future. I don't know if it's going to be the next expansion or the expansion after that, but this reminds me of them rotating, like, all of the Alpine cards in the last rotation, and then we got, like, a very Alpine-heavy expansion this time. The fact that they're rotating all of the countermeasure cards, like, not actually all of them, but, like, a lot of the countermeasure cards, the core ones that people have a lot of fun with, plus a lot of the synergy cards that work around countermeasures, the fact that all of these are being removed from the game, I don't think that they want to get rid of countermeasures as a mechanic. It's one of the 5 card types in the game, or not 5, one of the 3 card types in the game. So I don't think they're going to remove countermeasures. So what that tells me is that they're going to take countermeasures out for like 6 months, maybe a year, and then they're just going to come back hard. And when that comes back, when that expansion comes out, I think Imperial Strength will come back as sort of like, hey, remember, here's like a quote-unquote new card to counter these countermeasure strategies that we are pushing. So yeah, I think that we can expect some sort of counter synergy archetypes being pushed in the near future based on Imperial Strength and the other cards being rotated. Imperial Strength also saw a decent amount of play just because it dealt 2 damage to the enemy HQ. Then the Model 25, nobody ever played this card because it has Operation Cost and not Blitz. Target acquired. This card was originally 2 cost and nobody played it. They reduced it to 1 cost and people got excited that maybe you could play this card. But it turns out it's still kind of weak because you have to be trading in a unit. It's not a damaged unit, it's a unit that was attacked this turn. So yeah, it's just not quite good enough. Also, Type 94's surprise attacks. Why would you not just run those? Then they rotated Imperial Decree, which saw a lot of play in Japan France Resistance. And actually, I was really excited to play this in a Japan Finnish burn wombo combo, draw through your deck. Like, I had this vision in my head of this Japan Finland, like, burn deck that was going to be absolutely insane. And then I went to build it and realized Imperial Decree is gone. I think it's fine that Imperial Decree is gone, especially because you're introducing cards like Take Liberty. As it turns out, cards that cost 0 are really, really good. Cards that cost 0 are really, really good in a deck that can basically draw, like, deck itself, draw all 40 cards of the deck by, like, turn 12 relatively consistently. So yeah, this card's gone, and I think that's fine. Then we get to Soviets. Soviets lost some weird cards. Famously, Soviets now have an 8-cost tank, which means you can now upgrade on T-34s. However, they have rotated Siberian Transfer, so you cannot upgrade on Siberian Transfer on turn 4 to get the new T-34. This also means that Siberian Transfer OTK is gone. However, that was already gone when they removed Ura in the last rotation. So yeah, this card saw some play in Control over the time. In the last, 2 years, it's really only seen play in Siberian OTK, and that deck was already gutted, so this card being gone, I think, is kind of fine. And they removed Red Banner, which is one of the only meaningful changes to Soviets in this rotation. I think Soviets got by easiest. Japan, Germany, hardest hit. Britain lost some pretty good cards. Britain's sort of in the middle. Soviets and US lost basically nothing. But one of those cards for Soviets was Red Banner. This card saw... it was just sort of a staple in Soviet control, was not too powerful, and then they released Partisans, and Red Banner became absolutely insane, and then they nerfed Red Banner, and then it went back to just being a staple of control, and now it's gone, and, you know, that's a little sad, but they've introduced alternative ways to destroy friendly units to combo with these Confusion Partisan synergy cards. So yeah, I think it's fine to take out Red Banner for a period of time. I hope it comes back though. And then of course they removed Zukov because Monty. And Zukov is like arguably, like, even if they hadn't rotated Monty, I think Zukov would have there would have been a fair argument to rotate Zukov. This card saw play a lot, and it has been changed like 4 or 5 times. Like, this card has been changed so many times. And I was against it being changed into its current version because I just thought it would be basically just a staple of every Soviet deck ever until the end of time. Because 1 cost to draw a card upside is really, really good. And I was not as right as I was expecting. I was pretty right. Not gonna lie. But it did, and like, it didn't see play in every Soviet control deck. Like, I know myself, like, it was always like the 41st card I would put into Soviet control. But also, oddly enough, despite me complaining about this card, I was the one who played this card the least, I think. Like, I know everybody else who played Soviet control played Zukov much more than I did. But yeah, Zukov was just a very powerful card. And now it's gone, but it will probably come back for the same reason all the other general cards will probably come back in the future. Then we have the specials, 222nd Guard Rifles. I mean, this card saw play in, like, Machines of War, because you can cheat it out and then Ural Factory it into a Stalin. And that was basically it. The 35th Rifle Regiment. I remember seeing this card played in, like, 2019. But it's just not that good. Like, a 3-cost, like, a 3/4 infantry is probably, like, costed at around 2. Like, if there was just a 2-cost 3/4 infantry for 1 credit operation cost, I don't even think you would run that in Soviets. Like, if that was just a Soviet card, if this card just cost 2. So getting this card to cost 0 is very difficult. But even if you play this card for 0 100% of the time, there's basically no Soviet archetype that is supported that would be able to play that effectively. So yeah, just a weird card that never saw play. Mud. I'm glad Mud is gone. Mud was exclusively used as just a stall card for combo decks, and there's far too many stall cards for combo decks in Cards, so removing one of them from the game is good, and I hope it never comes back. Men of Steel was an interesting card. I played Men of Steel in my first ever OCC in a tokens deck, because Allegiance had recently come out, and I was thinking that, like, oh, Men of Steel seems like a really good tokens card, because you summon all these 1/1 dudes, and then you give them all heavy armor, and maybe at the time it was, well, at the time it was certainly better than it is now, even after the card was buffed. However, it's just, like, you play this because you have a lot of units on board, but if you have a lot of units on board, your opponent is going to be removing your board with orders, which means heavy armor does not matter. So it's, and the remove heavy armor from a unit, the best heavy armor units in the game say cannot be targeted by orders. So, yeah, it's just a little bit of a disappointing card. It would have been interesting if they made something like Mud, where it was remove heavy armor from all opponents' units, and that way it can remove the heavy armor from cards that can't be targeted. And also if they summon, say, multiple Stalins at the same time, you can remove the heavy armor from all of them at once, but even then that wouldn't see play, but, you know, just ideas. Then the 1271st Rifles, saw card played, this card saw some play as like a one-of in some token decks a long time ago that weren't that good. It saw more play in Baby Combo, back when Baby Combo was Soviet ally, before Baby Combo was eviscerated off the face of the planet, and for the last, like, 2 years, nobody has played this card, and nobody's going to miss this card. Then they have the MiG-3, which is another countermeasure synergy card that also just sucks. This card is just not good. This card has never been good. They changed it, and I think arguably made it worse. It used to be a 4/5, I think, but, like, its effect was slightly stronger. Or its effect was slightly weaker, so they buffed the ability to get it out, but then reduced its stats. But it's so difficult to get this out for cheap. This card is just awful. The 422nd Rifles, I'm sure a lot of new players to the game are, like, praising that this card has been removed. I remember this card being, like, the bane of my existence when I started playing the game, because it has Ambush, and it fully repairs every single time. So if you start getting buffs on this unit, you just win the game, because nobody runs removal when they start playing the game. Also, I think this card used to fully repair at the start of both players' turns. This card got nerfed at some point. And it was a card that it actually saw very limited play competitively at one point. Because when people were playing old Zukov with Cossacks, with the idea of just playing a turn 1 Cossacks 100% of the time, well, assuming you don't have it in hand and have turn 1 Zukov, but people were wondering, like, what if you play a second thing? So that way, even if you draw Cossacks, you still have a second infantry in your deck. So you reduce the turn 1 Cossacks chance, but you increase the chance of Zukov not being a dead card. And the second card that they would put in the game was the 4000, or in the deck was the 400, or not 400, the 42nd rifles. Because if you just look at Soviet 3-cost infantries, this was the best one after Cossacks. So yeah, I saw a little bit of play there, but I don't think it's going to be missed too much. Then Lesser of Two Evils was removed, again going after the card draw. This card saw a lot of play in artillery. This was like sort of the core card of Arty. The part of the engine that made it work. You'd play this, plus war production, plus supply chains as sort of your central card draw. You'd play Lesser of Two Evils, draw 2 cards, discard supply chain, play war production, and then suddenly you're drawing through your entire deck. It also saw some play in like Japan-Soviet Betty. It saw some play in combo decks where you would run a lot of excess tools. So you'd play Lesser of Two Evils as just a 2-cost, draw 2 cards, discard one of your like 5 stall cards in hand. As a cheap way to cycle through your deck a lot. So this card actually saw a lot of play in a wide range of decks. It was a very interesting card. And now it is gone because it says the word draw on it. Mobile defense is also gone. This is the other hit to Soviets. I did not play mobile defense a lot personally. However, I know it was a very, very popular card for a lot of people in Soviet control. And I think it was actually, like, it was good. I don't think this card is bad. I just always slightly preferred other options. But this was always a solid option in Soviet control. They lost mobile defense. I can tell you now that one of the cards they got back was 845th Rifles, which was like another core 2-cost card of Soviet control deck. So that, you know, they lost something, they gained something. This also had some limited play in like Soviet aggro decks because it just summons 2 tanks. But yeah, mobile defense will be missed. The 6th Naval Brigade, I actually hit rank 1 on ladder with a 6th Naval Brigade Soviet aggro deck in like 2020. Good times. Good times. Yeah, this card is just absolutely garbage. Its one redeeming quality is that it's better than Himeji. Then the 10th Guard Regiment. This card was recently buffed, but not buffed enough. This card, absolutely terrible. Just 5-2 slow, does absolutely nothing. Barrage, another card that was buffed. But again, it's just worse than like basically every other option you can use, so it sees no play. Reckless Assault, there was a fun Reckless Assault OTK deck. Reckless Assault, when they announced it, a lot of people looked at this card and were like, this card's insane. Because Alliance, at 4 cost, give only your non-US units +2/+2, was so strong it had to be nerfed because it was like the most played card in the meta. So 2 cost give your all of your units +2/+2 is insane, right? And it was very difficult to evaluate how good the when your units deal damage, your HQ takes damage effect, because you're like, well, if you play this card and then win the game, it doesn't really matter. But the problem is, it's very difficult to get into a situation where you play this card and win the game, and if you are in that situation, why would you not just play, like, Blitzkrieg, which is just substantially better? And it's really difficult. There's, like, no amount of overwhelming board control where you feel comfortable playing this card if you're not winning the game on the same turn. Because suddenly your opponent starts to turtle, and you realize you're taking, like, 10 damage a turn, and then you die. So yeah, other than the Reckless OTK, this card's on no play. I'm sure there's some Reckless OTK enjoyers out there who are sad, but then we have Ural Factories, which I spoke about a little bit before. Very similar story to Red Banner. Saw slightly less play than Red Banner, but, you know, same story. After it got nerfed, saw substantially less play, but it got nerfed for a good reason, and there's now alternatives. And I would be shocked if it never comes back, but I don't think it needs to come back in a hurry. The 128th Rifles. This saw very limited play in pincer. It's just not that great of a pincer option. Like, if you're because the units in pincer grow so quickly, your opponent's removing them with hard removal. Like 99% of the time, they're not trading into them. And then it saw very limited play in like ambush OTK decks where you'd use Zedomir to double the attack of an ambush unit, and then you'd give this card, or you'd use this card to give a unit ambush. So it basically lets you double the attack of any unit in the game. But yeah, this card will not be missed. And then the 89th Infantry Regiment. This card was actually saw a very limited amount of play because of the 2 cost to draw 2 if you have a guard. I'm blanking on the name of that card. But yeah, same reason as Welsh Guards, this card started to see a very small amount of play, but no, this card's terrible. And then Veteran Pilots. This is another case, sort of like the Air Landing Brigade, where it was a terrible card that nobody played, and then they buffed it to something interesting and playable, and now they are rotating it. So it's weird. I think maybe they'll do like a Soviet air, like give Soviets an air-themed archetype and expansion in the future and bring back Veteran Pilots at that point. But they didn't rotate Blood Red Sky, they didn't rotate anything else. So yeah, the fact that they just rotated Veteran Pilots is weird to me. I think they were just looking for a Soviet card to rotate, and we're like, nobody plays this. Then we get on to US, the last main nation. They're losing Strategic Planning. I remember getting Blue Blast to run this card in the first ever OCC, first or second OCC, and he almost won. Like, he got second. And the strategic planning, the strat planning, was not terrible. And then people realized that aggro decks existed. And nobody has ever played strategic planning ever again. I remember in the first ever Nations Cup, when you could change decks every round and it was King of the Hill strategy, I was on Team Canada and nobody knew who I was. And we were down like 2-0 and it was a best of 5, which meant I needed to win 3 consecutive games. And I won 2 consecutive games on US Frontline. And then going into the third game, I built a US-Japan ramp deck with strategic planning and like 4 Osaka regiments, and like we can do it. And it was just a hilariously heavy deck. And they saw US, they expected me to bring Frontline for the third time, so they brought like a hard anti-aggro list. And then I remember at one point I had like 2 or 3 Osaka regiments and like a B-17, and then I did like we can do it strategic planning, and made a couple of 8-20s. Hilarious card, really, really fun card if you have it, but absolutely hilariously terrible. Seaborn Invasion got rotated. I'm happy with this because, dear lord, Seaborn Invasion was a headache of a card to design things around. It just limited design space so much, and it had to be changed several times. And even in its current form, it was such a frustrating card because, at worst, you could get 2 3-2s. You could play Seaborn Invasion and get 2 3-2s. The 2-5 Marines, I believe they are. Or you could play this and get 2 3-6s. Or you could play this and get a 6-6 and a Jasko. Or you could play this and get a California Regiment and a Red Devils. Like, there was the variety of things you could get off of this. You could get units with Blitz, you could get units with ludicrously high health, you could get units that do absolutely nothing. This card was just an absolute dice roll. It was one of the most random cards in the entire game. And even despite that, saw very limited play. And when it did see play, everybody hated it. Like, the people playing it hated it, the people playing against it hated it. It was just not a fun card that heavily limited design space. It's a very thematic card, so I hope it comes back changed in the future. But I do not want it to come back in the game if it still says random. I mean, it doesn't actually technically say random on the card, but you know what I mean. And then, of course, US loses Patton because Monty exists. So, as we see, strat planning, Seaborn Invasion, Patton, US lost absolutely nothing. And if you think back to the last rotation, US also lost nothing in the last rotation. It's kind of funny because US just has so few good cards. It's very difficult to remove a US card from the game without making US unplayable. It is it is a conundrum. They lost TBF-1 Adventure. This was a staple of ramp back in the day. You would just play 2 TBF Adventures, you'd play 2 B-17s, and that's how you won the game. And then they nerfed TBF Avenger, and then people started building better and better, just better and better decks all around, like better aggro decks, faster aggro decks, better control decks that were better able to answer 4/4 bombers. And TBF Avenger just stopped seeing play, and as the game sped up, some decks just didn't run any units with 5 or more defense. Like, even back in the day, Jaggro was like the only deck that didn't run units with 5 or more defense, and like everything else, even like aggressive decks, would run units with 5 or more defense. Now most aggro decks don't. So it's just a really difficult card to use. So it was seeing basically no play, and now it's rotated, and I think that's fine. They've got some interesting alternatives. The M10 Wolverine, this card saw a lot of play for like a month and a half during the the counter-offensive meta. So they buffed counter-offensive. It became one of the best cards in the game. It gave a unit +2/+2 for damaged units, and the best deck in the game became US Soviet Frontline, where you would play just regular frontline stuff, and then you would do Winter Warfare counter-offensive, win the game. And you would do that on units such as the M4A1, which was untargetable by orders. So you could make like a 15/15 untargetable by orders tank. However, being a US frontline, the deck ran very, very little removal. So what you would do is you would just play an M10 Wolverine, and then your opponent would just be terrified of going into a counteroffensive because you just trade into it. Like, they would have to remove Wolverine. And even if they were removing Wolverine, it was often because it was trading with a Hellcat, it was trading with an M4A1, or even if they, or a Sherman, but like even if they traded into it with a Hellcat, it was fine. Also, they would run Patton, because you could do Patton Winter Warfare counteroffensive and win the game from hand, but also because you could do Patton Wolverines to kill their like 15/15. So yeah, Wolverine saw a ton of play in a very, very, very specific meta, and then it never saw play before that, and it's never seen play after that because it's just a little bit too slow. But it's an interesting card, so it's kind of sad to see it removed, but, you know, you have to remove something. Then you have the actually meaningful card that's removed from US, which is the 109th Combat Engineers. And this is a really interesting card, because it had to be nerfed. This was one of the best cards in the game on release, and then it has seen a ton of play in Frontline and Heinz since then. And certainly in Heinz, this card is very difficult to replace. This card is incredibly powerful in Heinz. In Frontline, because of the buff to the 164th, the 1/1 with Blitz, I was actually cutting Combat Engineers. Like, I was down to 1 Combat Engineers, I was trying out 0 Combat Engineers, and now it's rotated. So, like, if this happened like 6 months ago, I would say that this is actually a big impact for Frontline. However, the main use of Combat Engineers was primarily for turn 2 35T to get a 3-attack unit that can attack the front line, so you don't lose to air. Like, it was primarily really good into air, but air is gone, so for Combat Engineers, it's really weak into a lot of other decks. And then they added in a card that replaces it in a very similar role, but better. So yeah, they actually managed to replace one of the best cards US has ever had, before rotating it. So once again, US just kind of doesn't get impacted. They lose Allied Research Effort, which has seen 0 play. Outside, well, it's seen a ton of play on ladder by randos just building the greediest ramp decks ever. I've like basically never seen this work out. This card is hilariously bad. Apache, I've never seen this outside of draft. Campaign Trail, this card was brought to the top 8, I believe, of World Championships in 2022 by Corn Guy. And honestly, this card is like, I think this card got buffed since it was released. I think it was originally much worse on release. And like, if you read this card, it's sort of like Reinforcements, where if you read this card, it's incredibly powerful. And it's even better than Reinforcements because it also reduces operation cost. It's just a little bit too awkward. Like, it's just not quite there. Like, I think if this cost 3, that this would see a ton of play, but it costs 4, and you kind of want to be using this to end the game, not trade. Like, why wouldn't you just run Blitzkrieg? It was just kind of a weird card. And now it's gone. And I think that's kind of fair, because this card does somewhat limit design space, because its potential is very, very powerful. Then we lost the Zippo. Like, this card was... I picked this card in draft a lot because it killed the Volksgrenadier, the 3/6, which is also really good in draft. And that's all I can really say about the Zippo. Also has a really funny name. Then they lost the 2 5th Marines, which has never seen play ever. And yeah, came out in Theaters of War, and that's basically the only thing I can think about with this card. This card is just the card that tilts me when I play Seaborn Invasion. Then they lost Sniped, which is another countermeasure. I played Sniped in an OCC once. I played it as a one-of in Unitless, because I needed one more card in the deck, and it was like, do I want to play another? Like, Sniped is situationally really good, because it, like, stops certain OTKs, and, like, it brings units down to 2-2, and you have a lot of ways of dealing 2 damage, like, with gunship missions and whatnot. So, yeah, you know, I tried Sniped in the deck. It was not good, but I did play this once, technically. Then we have Carrier Cover. This card is another one of those, like, why did you rotate it? Like, you changed it into something interesting. This one, they changed it a much longer time ago. And it did see some play, like, once when Fiat was all the rage. There was some US-Italy Fiat decks that ran Carrier Cover. Carrier Cover used to be really, really powerful. It used to be gain a credit, choose one, gain a credit, or retreat a unit, or gain a credit slot or retreat a unit for 3. And it was incredibly powerful, mainly played in aggro decks as an additional just 3-cost retreat a unit. And then they made it into its current version, which is interesting. It's very, very interesting, but not that good because, you know, you have to be playing a US fighter deck. Then there's the 3rd Marine Regiment, absolute garbage. The Wildcat. This one, I think we've all been sleeping on Wildcat. I've had this theory that Wildcat is secretly really, really good. It's just not the deck to support it. And, like, every time there was an expansion, every time there was a nerf, every time there was anything, I would, like, try to, like, make a Wildcat control deck of some sort. And I was excited to do that with this expansion, and then I realized that they had removed Wildcat from the game. So I'm actually very sad about this, because I thought this card had a lot of unused potential, and now it's gone. But, you know, I don't think anyone else is going to miss this card other than me. Overcast is removed. I'd say that this is another case of removing draw, but, like, to be honest, who played Overcast ever? Like, I remember seeing Overcast in, like, some Tony OTK decks, just because you lacked draw, you lacked healing, and you wanted to ramp. So Overcast does all of those. It does all of those for your opponent as well, which is really bad, and why it never saw play. I remember, I've heard a story that this card was originally tested at 1 cost when they were going to release it, but they were worried that it would be too strong at 1 cost, so they went with 2, and now it's never seen play. I think it would be interesting to see what the game would look like if Overcast cost 1, but Overcast is instead rotated, and I think that's kind of fine. Special Delivery. This is another card that came out in Theaters of War, and unlike the 2 5th Marines, this card was absolutely insane. This card was ludicrously broken and one of the best cards in the game. And then they nerfed it, and then it continued to see a lot of play in Betty, and sometimes as just like a one-of in a lot of ramp decks and control decks. I really liked doing that as just a one-of, because, you know, you not have a lot of, or any 1 or 2 cost cards you'd just be hanging on to, so, you know, just Special Delivery is 2 cost draw 2, once you're later into the game. And, like, this is definitely a case of removing card draw. Like, Special Delivery was just a very good card. And they didn't remove, like, they removed Lesser, but they didn't remove Supply Chain, they didn't remove Betty. So, you know, getting rid of Special Delivery is just a remove card draw from the game, a change, I feel like, which is leaving US with not a lot. Like, they have Sherman, and they have We Can Do It, and that's kind of it. Then we get to the cards that they removed because they introduced Suppress. So they removed Magic, because it's like, you know, Duress exists. 0 cost, suppress a unit. Magic, it's different than Duress, because, like, it's not strictly worse than Duress. There's no card that is strictly worse than Duress. There's a lot of cards which are worse than Duress 99% of the time, and they rotated them, Magic and Overwhelming Force. But, you know, Magic could heal things. It kind of sucks that they tried to make the self-repair US deck, and then they immediately rotated Magic and Campaign Trail, which is pretty funny. I guess they just realized that that was a dead end, and are abandoning it immediately. Then they also rotated Overwhelming Force, This card actually saw a very small amount of play in like combo decks, like Tony, where you just use this as 0 cost, remove a guard. So you can go face with OTK. The buff to it to make it reset its attack was kind of interesting, and what makes it slightly better than Duress. Because Duress also is 0 cost, remove guard, smokescreen, ambush, destruction, and it resets attacks from high to low, and also does other stuff. So you might be thinking, well, is Duress not just strictly better than Overwhelming Force? You can play Overwhelming Force on your own unit, which has had its attack reduced, to raise it without removing some of its other beneficial effects, like Duress would. So if you think about it, it's not worse than Duress. But yeah, it's worse than Duress. Then we get onto the Ally Nation cards. We're almost done here. We have the block. Nobody ever played this. I mean, it's interesting to have a heavy armor card on a card this cheap. But your units do not lose Mobilize when damaged. Mobilize was never about keeping Mobilize on the units. Mobilize was about playing Mobilize units. So block just didn't fit into that archetype because it doesn't have Mobilize. Then we have the B26 Group Rattan. This is a very interesting card. I remember seeing a lot of this card back in the day, and then they nerfed Resistance a lot, because Vive la Resistance used to add 2 Resistance cards, and Liberation used to fill the hand with Resistance cards. So what you would do is you would play Britain, France, Resistance, you would put like 9 Resistance cards in their hand, and then you would play B26, Finest Hour to give it Blitz, attack, and then like remove their entire deck. And that was kind of interesting, and then they changed Liberation, and I've never seen anybody play this card since then. And with the fact that they've already rotated a decent amount of Resistance cards, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be making more Resistance cards, I think they've kind of are slowly getting rid of that as an archetype. It makes sense to rotate this card now. Then they rotated the 48 Régiment d'Infanterie, although I guess it is the 48ème? I don't know what the... But it's the 48 Regiment Infantry. And, like, nobody ever played this in Mobilize. There was just always better uses of your French slots. So, yeah, this has 0 impact on anything. Then Italy loses Pact of Steel. I'm very sad about this one. Again, it's going after the card draw. They're just, like, I think they're trying to limit the amount of card draw in the game to very specific cards, so it's easier for them to keep track of, like, which card draws they add in new, like, which nations get which cards, etc. So Pact of Steel kind of gets caught in the crosshairs of that, which is very sad. I really like playing Pact of Steel. It's a very interesting card. That saw very limited play. And then they remove Mediterranean Raid, which is arguably one of the worst cards in the game. Even after buffing it, it's a really terrible card. It used to be even worse. I think you used to only be able to play it if you had more units than your opponent, if I recall correctly. But that brings us to the end of the cards that were removed from the game in this expansion. So I'll just give some general thoughts overall. Again, US basically not touched at all. Soviets did lost like 1 or 2, like one of tech cards that you would run, but it didn't lose like any core components. And it gained quite a few cards from the expansion, like Depths of Winter, absolutely insane. I will trade Red Banner for Depths of Winter any day of the week. So Soviets largely untouched. Plus like they got some stuff for self-damage. And like in the expansion, Germany lost a ton, but also gained a ton from this expansion. Japan lost a ton, but also gained a ton from this expansion. And then Britain lost some good cards, but it gained more than it lost. Just in terms of the overall collection that exists in Standard, I think Britain did the best overall this expansion. And I know that's weird to say because it's like, you know, Jet. But like Germany lost a ton of things. Like I'll think of all of the archetypes of Germany that are basically unplayable now. Or at least substantially worse. And like even beyond the German cards, like could the combat engineers change? I don't think that change really matters for Frontline, but that change really matters for German US Heinz. So it's all of these weird things where I feel like Germany gets hit a lot, but then Germany got Swag and Jet, and 20th Panzer Grenadiers and the 64th Panzer Grenadiers. Like, you know, Germany cannot complain. And then overall, there's really a theme, if you look at it, of taking out countermeasures, which makes me think that they're going to have a countermeasure expansion. And I don't think all of them are coming back. I think some of them are good to stay dead, because they're just kind of useless. But yeah, other than that, I think the countermeasures is really the only thing that we can, like, sort of predictions we can make about the next expansion that we can derive from this. But also it's really interesting that they're just really going after card draw. And I'm interested to see where this goes. Like, I'm happy with the current state of the game in terms of card draw. Take Liberty is really the big exception right now to card draw in my mind. That and Britain having both convoys and the 2-cost draw 2. I'm really blanking on this card. People are going to be flaming me in the comments about this. But yeah, other than that, I think all around this rotation feels good. I feel like they kind of found their rhythm a bit more than the last rotation. The last rotation was a little more heavy-handed and unequally spread in terms of its impact. But speaking of the last rotation, I think 20? Don't quote me on that number, but an amount of cards that were rotated in the last rotation were immediately brought back because of bringing back cards every expansion. So now I will quickly go over the cards that were brought back. The first card that was brought back was HMS Illustrious for Britain, and this card was rotated because of Brit Air, and with certain other cards from Brit Air still being rotated and still being nerfed, such as Empire Strikes being out of rotation. HMS Illustrious coming back, I think, is fine. We've seen Air basically not resurface at all. But, you know, HMS Illustrious just being back in the game, I think is perfectly fine. Then we have MI5 coming back, which is weird, considering that they went anti-discard, anti-draw denial, anti-card draw, except Britain gets MI5 back. So, who knows? And then also Britain gets back Second Chance. So Britain gets Convoy, Second Chance, the draw 1, draw 2 if you have guard, blanking on it still, and MI5. They just get all of those. Plus Crusader is still in the game. So just Britain gets kind of all the card draw, and everyone else gets kind of nothing. Which, like, I'm happy that its Lend-Lease is gone, because at least, like, Second Chance, like, you know, you don't just run 3 Second Chance for Convoy in every deck. Like, that's not going to happen. But, you know, it could. It's interesting. What I find really funny about this is after the first rotation, I was screaming from the hills, like, why did you take out Second Chance and keep Lend-Lease? So I find it really funny that they brought back Second Chance and took out Lend-Lease in the immediately following expansion rotation. So, you know, maybe I do have secret control over 1939 and their balance decisions. Germany got back Panzerzug, which, I mean, I would laugh about, but Germany didn't really lose much. I mean, they lost research, but, like, they're not bringing back research unless everybody gets back research. So Germany getting back Panzerzug, like, whatever. I think the other one they lost was Kriegsmarine, which is arguably marginally better, but whatever. Then Germany got back Gebirgsjäger because it has Alpine. And they got back Stug 4, which has zero impact on anything. Japan got back Home Defense, which is really interesting. And I'm happy about this because Home Defense is one of those guys that they were pushing this, like, have low HQ synergy, and then they immediately rotated Home Defense. So I'm glad it's back in the game, and I know that it's already starting to see some play. I know Innocent Bubbles is playing a Japan-Finland salvage deck with Home Defense. That looks really interesting. So yeah, Home Defense, happy that it's back in the game. Then they brought back Mikawa Regiment because it has Alpine, despite it never going to see any play. And Ronin Sun, which, I mean, it would be interesting if they hadn't rotated, like, all of the other Japan air cards. Then Soviets get back 6th Airborne, which makes up for the fact that they lose Siberian Transfer. So now you can do 6th Airborne upgrade into the T-34, but that's a really expensive combo that's not going to see play. And then Soviets get back Workers Unite, but it's been completely changed. So Workers Unite was formerly draw 2 cards, gain a credit slot. So it was just a convoy and a war machine in a single card for Soviets. Now it is discard your light infantry units, gain a credit, and draw a card for each. Which is really interesting. So if you have 5 light infantry in your hand, you can play Workers Unite for 5 credits. You will gain 5 credits back, and then those 5 light infantry will all be discarded, and you will draw 5 cards. So it's not that good, because it's kind of difficult to get an amount of light infantry in your hand that you are comfortable discarding, because you have to play cards to get light infantry in your hand. You don't just get light infantry in your hand for free. Although now that I'm saying that out loud, that would be a really interesting idea if they have, like, add permanent effect cards to the game. You could make the Soviet permanent effect card add a light infantry to your hand at the start of every turn. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, Workers Unite, like, they brought back the card draw, but they couldn't give anybody just normal straight-up card draw, because that's apparently a British archetype. A core feature of Britain is having card draw. When has that ever gone wrong for any other card game ever? So yeah, they get new light Workers Unite, which it's interesting. Like, it's a card that's worth trying out. It's cool that Soviets don't have to rely on industrial might, in theory, as card draw for token stacks. So, like, I'm not mad that it exists in this form. It's just kind of weird. Then they get back 845th, which I'm very happy about. I love 845th. And it sort of makes up for the fact that they're losing mobile defense. With Zhukov gone, it's a little sad, because Zhukov onto 845th always felt fine. But yeah, it's just a good enough card that it's going to see play. And it has seen play in Soviet control since the expansion. And then they get back 35th Mountain Rifles, because it has Alpine. I think Jet Prototype is literally the only card in the game that says remove at the moment. Because the 34th Infantry got changed to discard, which was thanks to me, and that's one of my proudest things I've ever done. And Costly Victory got rotated, so this card literally came back because it has the word Alpine on it, and they were like, hey, Alpine expansion, despite Alpine not seeing any play since the expansion dropped, and especially not in Soviets, beyond Avicii, but that doesn't count. And then US got back high altitude bombing, which, fine. I mean, like, it's just kind of a good ramp card. Destroy 2 units. It's alright. Then they got back War Bonds, which was really good. A lot of people, myself included, were very confused why they rotated War Bonds to begin with. So, US gets a little bit of extra card draw, 5 cost to draw 1 card at the start of your next turn. That's the amount of card draw other nations are allowed to have. But yeah, I'm happy that War Bonds is back. I'm a little surprised they didn't rotate Hour of Need to make up for the fact that they're bringing back War Bonds. But, US can't ever be hurt by rotations. And then they get Uncle Sam, which I don't know why. I mean, it would be worse if they got back, like, the 32nd Rifles, or 32nd Infantry. 31st Infantry? I'm the 2-1 that draws itself. I'm the Chocolate Boys. How am I forgetting the name of that card already? Man, we're going to forget all of the names of cards that have been rotated after, like, a year. Yeah, so Uncle Sam is just they didn't get something better. Bring back, I would be kind of shocked if the Uncle Sam doesn't get rotated a second time for good this time, in the near future. It was really awkward, because it was the first rotation, so they rotated a lot of really bad cards. And then they were obligated to bring 20 of those bad cards back, because they were trying to get into the cycle of rotating things. And, like, in the future, as more and more cards get rotated and less get brought back, the pool of rotated cards will grow, so the pool of interesting and good cards that could be brought back that will have any impact on the meta will grow. So, it's a feature of the system that there's going to be some absolute duds that get brought back in the game in the first couple of rotations. And then we get to the Ally Nation cards. Just all of the Alpine cards got brought back. Like, literally just every single card that said Alpine was brought back into the game. And also Fiat. I do not know why. Like, because this card was absolutely unplayable, and then they buffed it, and it was, like, absolutely nuts, and everybody played it, and then they nerfed it, and nobody played it, and then it got rotated, and now they brought it back. And the reason I'm so, like, as I previously said, they have to bring back some bad stuff. The reason I'm confused about this is they brought back 3 Italian cards, 2 of which make sense, because it's the Alpine. They brought back Fiat, which seemingly has no synergy, and will have zero, and has had 0 impact on the meta, and then France only gets back 1 card, which is just weird to me. And they got back Western Allies, which I absolutely hate Western Allies, and I'm very happy that I've yet to see a Western Allies deck on ladder, but I absolutely despise Western Allies as a card. It's, like, better than Partnership, but everything's better than Partnership, so that's not saying much. But yeah, they got back Western Allies, but it's fine. It's gonna have no impact on the meta. So, that's all of the cards that came back. It really has basically no impact on the meta. I can't think of any of those cards which has seen any immediate play. Beyond 845th. Like, Alpine has seen no play. Like, Get Home Defense has seen limited play. Like, MI5, I haven't seen it, but I imagine it will see play in the future. I guess War Bonds? Although, honestly, I haven't seen a lot of War Bonds. I've seen a lot of Hour of Needs and War Machines. So yeah, nothing has had too much of an impact on the meta immediately since coming back from rotation, but some of them are good to be back because they are options in the future, and tomorrow is the patch, as of recording. Tomorrow is the balance patch that's going to gut Jet, and hopefully shake up the meta, and, some of these cards have a lot of potential to see some play after the meta. So, if you got through all of that video, or you just skipped through to the interesting parts and you're now at your end, thank you very much for watching. Comment your own thoughts down below. Join my Discord to continue the conversation there. Link is in the description. And subscribe if you haven't already. I will catch you in the next one.